Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome back again this week to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we sat down again with the same guest we had on last week, Mr. John Pruitt. John is the owner at East to West Safety Plus on-site safety training, and we talk a little bit further about not only the safety programs that they do training on, but also software systems, an approach you could take to actually implementing this type of technology, as well as the boots on the ground training that they do for companies every day. So hopefully you'll enjoy this second episode and have some takeaways that you can implement into your business and to help your company run and operate more safely. Enjoy the episode. Good morning again, John. Great to have you back on this week.
Good morning, man. Great to be here and back again.
Yeah, thank you. Had a great conversation last episode, and I just thought, man, we really need to dive a little bit deeper in on training, maybe more specifically today. And so grateful to have you back on and dig into this next conversation.
All right, great.
Awesome. So I guess, to start right off the top here, why do you think that actual methodology of training and approach to training is such an important aspect to having a proper safety program in a construction company?
An easy way to explain that is if you peek your room into anybody doing any safety training, how many guys are either looking at their phone or out the door? That's an easy telltale sign right there that they are not involved. They're not enacting on it. They're not part of this. They are here to check that box once again, opposed to that. So I think that's a big thing that you can see out there and in how that's kind of laid out a little bit. Who's really paying attention and why are they not paying attention? Is it because I've been doing this for 30 years or they don't feel like they're getting enough out of it? They're not having their attention held, whatever it may be. But that's an easy way to tell. You go to any office, any company, every 5 minutes, stand down, whatever you want to call it, wherever you want to go to. Yeah, just sit in your car and watch. You'll see. You'll see exactly how effective that's going for you.
That's a great point. We've all heard the term and hopefully we haven't firsthand experienced or been the victim of someone who is distracted driving. They're looking at their phone and all of a sudden they're rear-ending somebody or they're getting rear-ended or, some type of accident happens because they're paying attention to their phone instead of the work that they're supposed to be doing is driving. They're on a road and they're in a vehicle and it's moving and other vehicles are there. I haven't heard the term distracted working, but I think that's a real thing that you're talking about there.
Well, distracted working. I mean, you can see that a little bit more by how many ear pods you're starting to see in people's ears on job sites now, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of another way to sit back and just observe, right? There's a lot you can learn just by sitting back and watching people, watching their reaction, watch how involved they're getting with things, right? It's always been the phones. Hey, don't look at your phone, whether you're driving, whether you're operating a forklift, whatever you might be doing. It's like, yeah, also sit back. You see a lot of earbuds in ears that, where you can't hear that backup alarm. You can't hear this or you can't hear that, or, right? They are grabbing that phone, right? They are taking that extra little bit of time. You're like, there's a big difference there in seeing that and knowing exactly how fast something can happen.
Yeah, a lot of these new earbuds are actually noise canceling by design.
Right?
They're supposed to avoid you from hearing outside things that you're not paying attention on your phone, right?
Exactly.
Huh. Interesting. Well, one of the five senses are hearing, right? If we inhibit that even intentionally because we want to hear this latest album drop from our favorite rock band or listen to a podcast and you don't hear the forklift or the dump truck backing up.
Mm-hmm.
Things could get Western real quick.
Yeah, it really can. That's why one of the big things that I try to really drill in people's heads, right? It's like, we hear alarms all day. We hear backup alarms. We see flashing beacon lights. But if you're around that all day, every day, and you're around 10, 15 forklifts in a plant or something, you're droning that out. You're not even thinking of that anymore. That's part of your daily life in doing that and hearing that all day. You make eye contact with somebody, someone's intentionally making a bad choice at that point in time. So that's one thing that I try to get into a lot with people. I was like, look, those backup alarms, those horns, all necessary, all needed, those lights, great, absolutely. But you're not going to beat eye contact with somebody, and if you can't see something, that you better not do it in the first place. Why take that chance?
So now, in terms of training on those types of things, what types of tools or what methods do you like to use to make sure to remind people about these things so that you can raise the level of their awareness?
Well, two things. One, I think is one of the biggest things that works for me is just talking, having that conversation, right? If someone wants to sit down here, I'm sitting through another forklift. It's been 3 years. I got to sit down through another forklift class and I got to do what I have to do, blah, blah, blah. Opposed to just sitting there having that conversation, making sure you're covering the information that's required to cover, but by adding these stories in as well. Because when you start getting them engaged, sometimes you can just sit back and you hear their stories, all right? I get guys telling me every time I'm doing a training about a story of something going on, right? About what they just came from, The guy just trained last week, how their company that they just used to work for got a $30,000 fine for what he was doing with the telehandler, right? Now he's with this company because that company could no longer afford to have him around, right? But when you get those guys involved like that and they start talking stories, everyone starts listening. Everyone starts to want to participate a little bit more. But by having that conversation and doing it that way is a big difference between reading out of a book and trying to go stat for stat, word for word, a memory thing. And you talk to them, man. It makes all the difference in the world when you're dealing with people there. So whether it's their first time, because now they're hearing new stories, or it's their 50th time, right? They're even hearing different stories that are going on out there. And then they start recalling stuff and talk about how crazy that is. And once you can click on that emotional level and say, dude, that's insane. Well, that's a reaction I want. I don't want you to say, okay, I understand how to put a seatbelt on. No, I don't care. I don't want that. I want you to say, oh my gosh, that happened to that dude. That happened to that company. Right. And then other people say, I've seen that myself, man. So I think bringing that all together at once, I think is a game changer for people.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. We had, I think it was episode 5 or 6 of our podcast. We've been going for over 3 years now and in the 150 something episodes. But one of the very early episodes, we had a gentleman on by the name of Chad Hyvis, and he is a paraplegic, and he was operating a tractor with a fork and a 2-ton bale of hay, and the hydraulic light was on, but it was off and on. It had a leak and it was always low, and he just was in a hurry and was just used to that light. Kind of got muted, drowned out in his mind, like, oh, I'm in a hurry, so I got to hurry and do this. And he went to lift that bale of hay over, and the hydraulics failed on the bucket, and that bale of hay tumbled backwards over and smashed him in the cab. And he's very fortunate to be alive. I think this accident was over 20 years ago now. And now he goes all over the world speaking and talking about this accident and how it's impacted him. But many, many of the speeches that he gives are to construction companies on safety, and not ignoring those warning lights and not avoiding what he knew he needed to do, because again, he needs to go home safely to his family, which, at this point, he's got to rely on them a lot more than he did before, right?
Well, it's kind of funny you talk about that, because that's the second part to where I really come in a lot of the trainings I do, is I really drill in tight on the operator's manual that they're dealing with. I mean, that manual was put together by their engineers, their safety guys, the best practices. Do this, don't push this, right? These are the limits we can't go beyond. And that might change from one skid steer to the next, from one forklift to the next, right? There are differences there. And that's what a lot of people don't understand that. So I think that whole option of having those discussions with people and getting them interactive with it is great. And then to get more specific, because when you go through training, a lot of it, it's the same stuff. They're boxes you got to check to make sure they understand these things, which is great. Well, how do we get them involved? How do we get them more active with it, right? And I think through discussion and stories is a big way to do that. But at the end of it there, to be able to add anything else into that is a big plus when it comes to that. Like a lot of times, like a lot of my social media that I have, right, through, TikTok, Instagram, all across the board there, I do a lot of the fail videos and stuff, right? And people
yeah.
and so I found out, and if you pay attention to that, if you're just looking through that a lot, you know how many comments you start to see go through that between safety guys saying, well, they shouldn't have done that, he should have done this. Or, I seen this on my job site. OSHA busted a guy on my site for $20,000 for doing that. The discussion on a fail video, pretty impressive. You throw out another video there saying, here's exactly how you put on a harness, see where the discussion's at, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, to me, again, that's coming back to what's important to people, getting them involved and interactive. Because I got a lot of people like, why would you show that? I was like, because you know what? Now 1 million people have seen that video and seen, oh my gosh, I've seen that on a daily. That could have happened to me. And then you see discussions that carry on throughout there, right? Because at first I wasn't big about a lot of the fail videos and stuff. It was more, let's talk a little bit about safety. Let's do our thing. But unless that's what you're looking for, people don't stop on a lot of that stuff, right? They move on just like they do in regular life, right? But more people knows what a Kardashian is opposed to what OSHA is. And that's a big issue, even in the field that we're in, right?
Yeah.
But I think, so I started to reframe my social media when it came to that, to more of that, those guys sitting at lunch, flipping around, looking at stuff, or waiting for that clock to start in the day, looking at those crazy videos and stuff, because it brings attention to it, right? But the discussion that happens with that seems to be tenfold than a bunch of safety guys with a bunch of letters behind their name talking about the best way to clip that harness, right? It's funny because now you get real world, real life stuff, and people looking at that's like, dear Lord, man, that's in the back of my head when I'm on my forklift later on today.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that what you're talking about is the why, not just the what, right? The what is how you clip it in. The why is, if you don't do this, here's the why. Here's what could happen to you, right?
Exactly. And I think both parts of that's just as important, right? Because we do a lot of those other videos and stuff well, but what brings that conversation together, what makes people say, oh my gosh, that is insane, that's the reaction you want to have out of training. You don't want to go through, a multiple hour training class to have someone say, all right, thanks, can I have my card now? Well, I don't even care if you've been through it several times, I like it, and it happens mostly, at least one person out of almost every class I finish said, man, I learned something different today from that. And I was like, that's what I wanted, right? I wanted you to get that one extra nugget that, even though you've been in the industry for a long time, you heard that story, you saw that video, and you're like, man, I didn't think of it that way, or I didn't look at that was a possibility that could happen.
Are you looking to remain OSHA compliant while also keeping insurance costs low? Then you need Safety HQ, the safety app that offers resources like Toolbox Talks and JHAs to help contractors improve their safety practices. Users can also use inspection checklists and real-time reporting to keep up to date with OSHA rules. Keep your crew safe. Check out Safety HQ today.
Yeah, it's a great takeaway. And I've got to imagine there's probably topics that get recycled that, maybe you should be hitting every quarter, or maybe even monthly in some cases, or if there's a specific accident that happens in a company, it probably pays to focus on that a little bit more heavily until everybody really understands that. But what you're saying is, or what I'm hearing is, that these stories, these real world experiences that might be in their company or a company they know, or at least something that's very relatable to them, that's what personalizes that message, so that they actually internalize it and think about it, and it is top of mind, so they can operate more safely.
Yeah, and it is funny though, because where I get the most flack for that is through probably the most professional side of things on LinkedIn, right? Where all the safety guys are with all this stuff on there. Most of them understand it and they laugh and they conversate with it too. But again, you get a lot of them like, why would you show that? That's not safe, or this or that. And I was like, well, you know why? And that's why no one's listening to you in your class when you teach them anything, because you're going this straight thing across the board, opposed to having that conversation, looking at the possibilities, talking outside the box a little bit with it. But it's funny because on LinkedIn, like I said, that's where I get more flack than anything from certain people, and plenty and not, a lot of guys are like you. It's like, man, that's crazy. Should have had a seatbelt on, right? Good. We learned something. Here's why you should have had your seatbelt on, because of this happened to this dude. A lot more people learned about it and understood it a little bit more and then saying, well, you didn't read this code or this citation or whatever. It's like, calm down, nerd. Let's just have a conversation here, right? I don't care if you're better than me or smarter than me and you got a lot more letters at the end of your name. That's great, man. That's not me. I'm in the aspect of making sure that, hey, let's train people in this. Let them get involved. Let them understand it. Let them be part of it and take away something from that. That's just way more important to me.
Yeah. So how often do you hear employees of companies, when you're doing these trainings, how often is it brought up that, hey, actually the other day I did this and this and this and made this mistake, and where people are actually sharing the truth of really what's happening and maybe even giving you a testimonial as to why what you're sharing really is important because they had a near miss or something?
Well, that's usually a big ask to ask that, and that usually depends on who's in that room. Right?
Sure.
If a lot of the big wigs or their safety guys not in the room and it's just their guys getting that, man, you hear a lot more stories, a lot more people talking about stuff, right? The second they're in there, like, I don't know what happened, man. It was a fluke thing that happened to me. I always have my seatbelt on, and I don't know how I got flung out this time and landed on the third shelf over there. Well, when they're not in the room, you hear a lot more stories and talk about it. But I always bring that up. I always ask people, it's like, well, what have you seen that maybe this guy hasn't seen? Especially if I'm on a job site dealing with a company and here they're heading up 4 or 5 different job sites, and maybe we come together on one job site to do a bigger training. I always ask them, it's like, what are you seeing on your job site? What have you seen on your job site? And these guys are like, man, that's crazy. That's right. Well, you need to watch out for that on yours. Take that extra precaution, right? Make things available to everybody else that you need to be with it. But in that sharing, that's where I find it to be real beneficial from like different superintendents to different job sites, and what they've seen, what they've got going on. But yeah, otherwise, being in the office setting in there, 2 things are interesting. One, how quiet they are when the safety guy's in the room, their own safety guy or their boss is in the room. And also when I talk about certain things from the OSHA side that really would impact their office, to see their office personnel leaning over to one another, whispering in one another's ear, like, I didn't know that, or I didn't have that. Where can we find that document? Where can I fill that out? So you see it on both sides. It's kind of funny.
Well, it is interesting because I've been in, and I don't know that it's hundreds, but I've been in many dozen meetings where I was in an office. We were doing maybe a presentation on our software and talking about the payroll process or approval or how companies are getting affirmations or sign-offs for, time and labor. And very often the CEO or the president or whoever the head honcho is in that room, when we ask certain questions, they'll say, oh yeah, we always do that. And then all of a sudden the whispering starts to happen. And then sometimes someone will say, actually, we don't really do it that way. And then the owner's like, well, I thought we were doing it that way. And we tried to, and we used to, but then this and this and this, and now because of this and that, all of a sudden it's like a therapy session, where they're asking the right questions and kind of poking the bear. And all of a sudden there's this dialogue going on, and companies are learning all kinds of things, even about how they're actually operating. And it's often very different than what the upper management actually thought was going on, boots on the ground, right, so to speak, in the office.
And that non-meeting, by sitting in on that, was the best meeting they probably had all year long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it opened up a bunch of things to say, hey, are we doing this? We're not doing this? Well, how can we do this? I didn't even know we need to be doing this. And what can we use to make X, Y, and Z better for us? That conversation wasn't happening before that took place, right? So I think that's a great thing to have.
Yeah, a lot of those things that are, again, upper management might assume that all of these things are happening because they're supposed to happen. How do you try and, I guess, not only motivate and incentivize, but help companies to have a greater desire to be in compliance because it's the right thing to do? I mean, are there any tactics or any questions that you ask or that you try and probe to get these conversations happening within a company?
It's tough because it seems like the best way that I can do that from my side is almost from the field. It's almost going through the wrong way with it, because you go into an office, I want to talk to somebody. Guess what? That owner don't know you. He ain't got time for you. You're talking to the lady there who's actually running the office, the secretary, the office, manager, whatever that is. What do they take important from that? We already have a safety guy. It's like, okay, well, we benefit a lot of safety people, right? Who, There's certain things they don't cover that we can cover. There's certain things that they cover that they want us to have a fresh set of, eyes on or ears on or talk about that might change it up for their guys, right? But then you get a lot of, we already take care of this. We're in-house. We're good to go, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's a hard decision to make. But if you don't have that chance to sit down, you go into a job site trailer, you tend to have a little bit more time for them. Then you just got to make sure they can take that to the inside or be helpful for you to be able to promote that on. And that's what's kind of hard coming through that direction with it. It's a little bit different than going directly in, finding that guy, hey, here's what we can help provide for you or add into your safeties program with stuff, opposed to, I ain't got time. We already got a guy for that. But yet at the end of the meeting, exactly what you said here. They didn't know about X. They didn't know about Y. They didn't know about Z. They're not doing this paperwork stuff, right? So it's like, well, that didn't work out for anybody, did it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like as a parent, if somebody said, if you went into family therapy and a therapist asked mom and dad, how tight ship do you run at your house? I mean, how do you feel like things are going? And I think most parents, we run a pretty tight ship. I mean, here's what we do. Here's the, what are some rules you have? And parents could probably list off all the things that they think are happening. But then if you ask the kids the same question, the kids might say, mom and dad are always fighting, something completely different than what, you think is going on. So I think that's probably a healthy way to approach it.
And that's kind of one of the things too, I try to take an angle at is me trying to work with general contractors or that superintendent on the site for what's going on their job site, right? I mean, if they're watching over 10, 15 other contractors on their job site, they can't sit back and say, oh, it's just me and I've got a helper over here who might need to unload stuff once in a while. So yeah, well, what about everyone else on your job site here, right? It's going to put you back and behind the schedule if OSHA hits them with something and they've got to wait a week or two to get their guys trained. Well, now you're out that contractor working on your site for that time, all right? Or they're putting your guys in danger because they didn't know what they should have been doing or doing things properly with that there. It's like, so I'm trying to fine tune that niche between the office, the superintendent, and what goes on their job sites. Because again, too many times you hear that thing is like, I don't need it until I need it, right? I only need that card if OSHA came out here, right? And I've been doing this for years. Like, well, it's a lot more than that. There's a lot more to that all goes on with that, but that's a mindset. And I think that if you can break that mindset and get everybody on the same page, it makes it easier. It makes it better. Everything's much smoother, less downtime, less issues, the whole 9 yards.
So for those companies listening that maybe don't have a safety manager, they don't have a huge full rolled out safety program, what are some easy low-hanging fruit bullets that you could share that companies should be doing or supposed to be doing that maybe they're not aware of? And maybe what are some approaches or software systems that they could utilize in order to actually start being more in compliance and running a safer business?
Look, one of the easiest things to do is to look up OSHA itself. Go to OSHA.gov. They've got literal manuals that you can download, whether you're a small business, a big business, whether you're in this industry or that industry, and they will give you a checklist of what you have to do and how you have to be in compliance over what. That's everything you need to know with that, as far as that goes. And then how they carry it out, I always think software is a great thing because one, it keeps your documentation, like you said, has the boxes there for you as long as you're not just checking them to check them. It's actually productively looking at those boxes there saying, hey, I am covering what I need to cover here come the end of the day with everything with it. So I think it's super important to have that backside of that for a bunch of different reasons when, and following and being in compliance, having those match with that. But I think the first part would be, someone get on OSHA.gov, man. You can get on that thing, look in there. You can find booklets, downloads, PDFs to at least get your grounds of saying, okay, this is the stuff we need to look at here. Because everyone's different, right? When it comes to equipment, I was like, look, if you think of the two basic overall rules that OSHA is telling you to do is, hey, make sure you have a safe working environment for your employees, number one, right? I got to have a safe working environment for them. Two, if you are requiring them to do anything that requires something that needs training, you have to train them properly so they know what they're doing with that. That's two big keys right there. You do those two there, as far as your immediacy, what's going on your site, that's going to be a big help there. And then the technical side about what do I need? I get a lot of guys a lot of time, and I talked about this a little bit before, and that's that difference between wording, right? Aerial work platforms used to be the name of them in the day. Now they're called MUPs, right? Mobile elevating work platforms. But if I'm talking to somebody, they certainly don't know what a MUP is. That sounds like some made up work. Aerial work platform, you're lucky if you get that. But if I tell a guy, hey, do you work on a scissor lift or do you work on a boom lift? They know what I'm talking about, right? So that just goes to show you that disconnect when it comes to that there on that side of it. You see a lot of differences between, I always came across that issue. Sometimes people say, well, that's not the right word for it. It's like, yeah, I know that. You know that. You know that. The guys who are washing it, that's not meaning nothing to them. They're not going to stay on there. They're not clicking away. They got to know, hey, this is a new standard. This is a new setup. This is a new everything. But if I'm not saying the right technical name of it, again, that goes into how are you talking to these people, right? You talk to them like regular people, right? I mean, we all learn and listen different ways, but if you're coming out of that direction with it, I mean, no one's even going to stay to click on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So one of the things also, I mean, we talked about software. So our key sponsor of our podcast, Foundation Software, has a module called Safety HQ, and it has those toolbox talks. It has these processes nailed down for you. It's tied into those things with OSHA. So find a system that can actually help this be more digestible. So you don't have every field employee necessarily having to click into OSHA.gov and click on those links. I mean, if we face reality, most of them probably aren't going to do that.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying there for that system there, I think that's step 2. Step 1's knowing, hey, what do I need to know?
Yeah, sure.
That's why if I can look at OSHA, I can look at those manuals, it'll print out right before you look at it. Then you're like, how do I implement that? And it goes into exactly what you're talking about. Well, you get software, it's going to walk you step by step about everything you need to know. Keep you in compliance, keep your guys safe, keep your trainings lined out, everything you need to do as far as making your company run smooth and everyone staying safe on that.
Yeah, there's a phrase, and I've heard this quite a bit. I really love this, and it goes for being, fit in life, maybe exercise, having a wellness program that you run as an individual to try and feel better and perform better in your day to day. But they say, you've heard the term probably, you fall to the level of your training. But I've heard more recently and really have adopted, you fall to the level of your systems, because training is the knowledge and the information, but the system is the implementation of that knowledge in that system. So I think having a system in place where everybody goes to this one place, this one thing, to get the information and to deploy it and actually implement it. And I think, software is a great example of something like that.
And I think that's all great, and I think that's necessary, absolutely. And I think kind of that's why we really enjoy doing on-site training. That's primarily what we do. And what's better for somebody, to go to a job, to see their location, to see their hazards, to train them in their environment, other things they can see, point at, look at, saying, hey, this has been an issue, this has been an issue. And then on the back side of it, train them on the equipment they're actually using. That's kind of one of the issues I have, sending somebody somewhere else. You're working on a lift that these guys probably might not even be on ever again. They might not own one like that. They might not use one that small or that big, but that's not what they were trained on. So for me, part of that to making it fit with that, hey, train on your site with your hazards, with your people, in your environment, on the equipment you're actually using.
Yeah.
That's a big difference right there. And like you said, if you're using your system, bam, it's putting everything in one box. Here we go, right? Now we can take that and develop that and grow that out and have that system in place to make sure that happens. But that's why I've always been a huge advocate for the on-site stuff on your equipment, right?
Yeah, that makes great. That's hands-on training, right? It's actually, it's not the flight simulator. It's actually getting in the jet. It's feeling the real thing, in practice, right?
Hey, you go to a location to do some training, and they're operating on a forklift that has 3 levers, but at your job site or the one you're going to rent's got 4 levers. You're sitting there looking at it like a deer on ice, right? Like, what is that magic lever over there, right? Or whatever it may be. But so I always find it super important if you can train those guys on that. And again, it might be a different piece the next job site. But for now, we're training them in a real world environment on their actual equipment in their place of where they're at. And that makes a big difference from somebody getting on something, going somewhere else. Say, man, mine looked nothing like this when I did my training. I feel like I'm at step one again, right?
Well, it's that, it's funny you mentioned this. I don't know why this popped in my head, but it's this pretty well-known quote by Mike Tyson. They say, talk about training, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's like when you're actually in the actual boxing match in the ring, you put in all the training and the work, might be for a whole year, and then somebody actually punches you in the face. What a wake-up call, right?
I'm from the jiu-jitsu world, my daughter's been doing it forever. That's a big saying that goes around there, A lot changes once you get punched in the face though, right? So you got to adapt and be that. But, you were talking about these systems and all this in place. And that's one big thing that, this video production that we have in-house now, the one video production, we got those guys there that we're trying to change the game a little bit, right? We've all seen some cringy videos. Oh, for $50, you can take this training online or this training online. I'm like, dude, you are just clicking through, hoping you get some answers right at the end of it, right? It's not getting your attention. It's not bringing there. We want to put something together, and the vision these guys have and how they do things, it just kind of sucks you in. So I want it to be very different in that aspect. So whether we do an online thing here in the future, or this is just for a company we can go into, right, and do their training for them, we want to start doing some of our trainings that we record when we're on that job site so they can use that video for in-house. Right. That's something we want to bring, to have them put that into your systems and have that when they show that, or for their new hire or whatever that may be. So we've got a whole aspect we want to hit. And I think how you film it, how it looks, and how you're talking to people is a game changer in all the training when it comes down to it, for sure. And if you got systems like you have to put them into place, there's not a lot of unchecked boxes you have after that. You're really helping the people out, doing it properly, and doing it in a way that we're covering everybody.
That's beautiful. So, John, how do the listeners find you, find your resources, your content, potentially have you come out, train, or help their organization and get some help?
Yeah, so for us, everything's under East to West Safety Plus. So East, the number 2, West Safety Plus. So through the website to all of our social medias, we kind of try to keep everything the same. So it was easy for everybody to find when it comes to that there. But everything from TikTok to YouTube to Instagram, LinkedIn to our website, it's easy to get a hold of us for sure. But yeah, that's what we like to do, man. We like to help these guys out. We like to go to them, get out and about, get some fresh air, talk to some of these people on the site, and kind of make it where they shake your hand at the end of it. When you don't see a lot of that going on, you're like, man, did anyone get anything out of anything that happened today? When they were looking at their watch, their clock, their this or that, but at the end of it, they come and say, man, thanks, man. I learned some stuff today. They remember that stuff. And that's kind of where we want to be. So between that and doing these videos we want to do and this whole production, how we film things and do things, it's going to start getting implemented here really soon. Hopefully that'll be a big game changer for others, that we can start putting out there, posting more, and getting more interactive with everybody out there.
That's beautiful. Well, we love having you on, and it's been a lot of fun to have these couple conversations. I hope the listeners can tune in to all the goodness that you have to share. So we encourage everybody to check out East to West Safety with John and his crew, and hopefully it'll help your organization get in touch to bless more companies.
There you go. Perfect, brother. I appreciate it, man. Hope to be back, and I'll see you guys soon.
Sounds good. Take care. Thanks again.
All right. You too. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.